I mean, I think the world has seen so many different shocks happen that people are always concerned. We do not expect a global recession. We're far from it. Growth is expected to be 3% this year. I think things look a little better than they did in April when you had the financial events, for instance, in the US and in Switzerland. Things are a little better, but still we are in a highly uncertain world. So there are several risks, and many of those risks are, could make things worse.
من هي أبرز المخاطر التي بالفعل تقلقك اليوم؟
One is with China and growth in China. We have growth slowing in China, but things could be worse than we expect, especially if there is a big event in the property markets. That is one major risk. The second is what happens to commodity prices. We're seeing the events, the Israel-Gaza conflict. If that becomes a regional event and that affects oil prices at a time when inflation still has not come back down to target, that can be a very important concern. And that might need central banks may need to raise interest rates even more. That has important spillovers. And climate shocks. There are many climate shocks that are affecting the world.
واحد من الأمور التي تقلق أصحاب الأعمال اليوم هو موضوع معدلات الفائدة وفعالية وسرعة البنوك المركزية وعلى رأس الفيدرالي الأمريكي بالتحرك، لأنه ذلك بالتأكيد بيأثر على القطاع البنكي، بيأثر على كلفة الدين، وبالتالي على spending، على الانفستمنت. رأيك هل هناك نوع من التأخر ربما كما يقال في تحرك الفيدرالي الأمريكي إن كان بالرفع أو بالإيقاف أو بالخفض؟
There are always going to be risks, but we see that right now central banks in many countries are in the right place. It's not a question so much about whether to raise interest rates by more, but how long to stay tight. And we do think central banks need to stay tight because the fight against inflation has not been won yet. So yes, indeed, this means that it's costly for businesses in terms of interest rates. It's costly for governments in terms of their own borrowing. But we do need to slow the economy down some so that we can get inflation durably back down to target. If we don't do that, then we're going to end up with a big inflation problem requiring much bigger interest rate increases, and that's even worse.
هذا اللي ذكرتيه نقطة مهمة جدا، وهو الاهتمام بموضوع الانفليشن، موضوع التضخم على حساب النمو. أعطيني الأسباب الثلاثة الأهم لأن يكون المانديت أو أن يكون الاهتمام الأبرز هو بموضوع الانفليشن ريت لمشاهدينا حتى يكون في فهم أكثر، لأنه الشعب اليوم بيقول لماذا نحن بهمنا الانفليشن، لماذا لا نركز على النمو؟
If we live in a world where inflation goes up substantially and stays at high levels, we worry that inflation expectations will change and the mindset of people will become one of a high inflation environment. That we know in countries where that has happened, that has been negative for growth, it's been bad for employment and jobs. We cannot have that. Now, it is true that in the process of bringing down inflation, there is this trade-off, which is you lose some growth in the process of bringing inflation down. But I have to say that this time around, for many countries, that trade-off has not been very big because labor markets have been quite tight. Despite all these increases in interest rates, you still have high levels of employment. So that trade-off has been smaller. But yes, there are countries, there are more frontier markets, more developing countries where, giving up growth it's been more costlier for them.
خليني انتقل شوي للمنطقة وللاقتصادات في المنطقة. نحن بنعرف أن الوطن العربي ينقسم لقسمين، الدول التي تستورد النفط والدول التي تصدره، وفي فرق بالتأكيد بالنمو. اليوم عندما تنظرين بشكل عام وين بتشوفي النقاط المضيئة في اقتصاد الوطن العربي؟ أي الدول بالتحديد ولماذا؟
So, just quickly in terms of the MENA region, our outlook, we have growth projected to come down quite a lot this year relative to last year. And that is to an important extent driven by the production cuts in oil exports, right? So it's by countries that are oil exporters and the effect that we're seeing through the production cuts on them. And also because of the tightening in monetary policies that we're seeing, the spillover effects of that. You're right, different countries have different experiences. We're in Morocco. I'd like to recognize the important reforms that's been taking place in this country, on multiple fronts. Despite the earthquake, we expect growth in Morocco will be higher this year than last year. And I think that's because they put the reforms in place to build resilience in the economy. Saudi Arabia is undertaking a very major transformation of their economy diversifying into many other sources of output rather than just the energy sector. It's very ambitious, it's very modern. That is again another area where you can see big reforms happening.
من الأمور التي ذكرتها في مستهل النقاش اليوم هو موضوع الحرب في غزة بين إسرائيل وفلسطين. كيف تنظرون إلى هذه الحرب؟ ما هي التداعيات المتوقعة إن كان على اقتصادات المنطقة وإن كان على أمن الطاقة وأسعاره؟
I mean, it is human tragedy what's happening, the situation in Israel and Gaza, and the thousands of lives that are being lost. I mean, we really hope that this will end peacefully soon. You asked about what the implications could be of this. It's a bit early to speak to that. It's going to depend upon how much this conflict spreads, if it becomes a regional conflict. If, for instance, it has an effect on the amount of oil on the market, then through that channel, we could see an effect on the global economy. But again, it's too early to say whether that's going to happen. What I can tell you is, in the past, when oil prices have gone up by 10%, global output has fallen by around 0.15 percentage points over the next 12 months. And inflation has gone up by 0.4 percentage points. So that could be an important impact on the global economy, but we really hope that we can de-escalate and come to a peaceful solution soon.